The person who put the exhibition together, who really thought about Picasso's landscapes and how they are a window into his creative process that has not been examined in great depth, especially in traveling exhibitions before. And that is Laurence Madeline. And I'll give you a little bit of a background, quickly. After receiving degrees from the Sorbonne and the École du Louvre, Laurence was curator at the Musée D'Orsay. She was then curator at the Musée Picasso in Paris. She became chief curator for the French National Heritage and was custodian of the Picasso archives. She currently is the director of the museums in Besançon and has written or co-authored more than 20 books, including Picasso and Africa, Picasso and His Muses, Correspondence, Pablo Picasso and Gertrude Stein, Women Artists in Paris, 1850 to 1900, and of course, drum roll, this one, Picasso Landscapes, which is available in our gift shop. So, she knows a little bit about Picasso. So we are so honored that Laurence is joining us today to speak about Picasso landscapes. And please give her a very warm Charlotte welcome. Is that good?
Yeah, I guess so. Thank you very much, Todd. Thank you very much to all of you being there on a Saturday afternoon when you have so many things to do, but listening to a lecture. I will try not to make it an actual lecture. It will be a little freestyle for different reasons. First, I gave already 2 hours in the show, and I want to do something a little different. We are not in front of the works. And second, because I have been working a lot on Picasso landscapes, and since last week, I forgot a little the show because I've been busy to other topics. Like the next book I'm going to publish, and some essays and so on. And when I've been asked to prepare this lecture, I went back to Picasso landscapes and told to myself, wow, it's a very, very interesting subject. Wow, there are so many things to do and to say. That I fell in love again with this show and with all the material, all the things I studied for 4 years. And let's start with this photo, which is a kind of introduction to the show, because what you have under your eyes, the window from Picasso's studio at Notre-Dame-de-Vie, shot by Edward Quinn, is what you will, or what you already discovered, or what you are going to discover upstairs, the large panorama with these buildings in concrete on the hill of Mougins. It's really a very strong introduction because you have Picasso facing this landscape and acting to be a painter. I'm not sure that he actually painted this way, I don't know. And you can see as well how elegant he is with this wonderful shirt. And of course, I would like to know what is in the parcels, and I will never. Okay, so starting my work on Picasso landscape, I had some questions which were, considering the landscape, is it a way to find a new answer to the question, is Picasso a painter of tradition or is it something else? So this was one of my first questions I had about Picasso and the landscapes. And I just asked myself, okay, In the tradition, there is this academic genre hierarchy with history, scène de genre, portrait, landscape, still life, 1 to 5. We can say that he made history, Guernica, absolutely history, scène de genre, Les Noces de Pierrette, portraits, here it's Vollard, landscape, of course, there is one, Atlas, and still life. So he did all the genre, which puts him in the situation of being a real tradition, painter of the tradition. And the tradition is as well the way he dealt with the big tradition of landscapes represented in the museums, like Le Concert champêtre de Titien in the Musée du Louvre, or Poussin, so important for Picasso, or Calvernet, you have, or for example, Drolling with this way of looking at the city through a window, which is really the tradition of the birth of landscapes in the 50th century. Sorry, my English is not always very good, and I would like to speak French. Okay. And you see, just like the look at old masters has been already taken in charge with the generation before Picasso, or 2 generations, Manet, Cézanne, Van Gogh, and Le Douanier Rousseau. Everybody is looking at what previous painters did, and everybody is reacting, and Picasso is among these painters because he will react to what Manet, for example, did looking at Titien or looking at Poussin. Very bad photos, I'm sorry, but I needed I don't know why, I don't have a better one, but I needed to introduce you a very important notion regarding this question of the tradition at Picasso's. It's these 2 examples. On the left, a landscape of 1896, and on the right, an academy of the same year. It's because Picasso was trained like a painter of the 19th century. He would spend the summers outside on Le Motif, making a lot of sketches of landscapes with houses, with donkeys, with pigs, and with trees, and with everything. And during the winter, he stayed at the studio, at the academy, and make some drawings of naked people, just like a very traditional training. And just like Manet or Monet less, because he flew very soon from the academy, but it was really a tradition, and Picasso has been trained in this tradition, this rhythm of summer and winter, or winter and summer, I don't know. And this tradition goes to all the life of the painters. You have here, I like it very much, it is a caricature from L'Assiette au beurre, where you have this wealthy painter going to the country for summer, and it is written, our artistic glories, whose canvases are expensive, business is business, are going to are putting their aesthetic to the fresh air. It's a tradition that the artists left their studios, left Paris, and go to the country also every summer. Picasso did exactly the same, and wanted to go to the country every summer and spend 3 months at last. I can tell you, from the 20s, he left Paris on July 15th, and will come back on September 29th, 30th, and sometimes October, but it was really a whole period outside. Here, I don't know why it is here, but I can give you a kind of a hint. You have this recall of the true landscape painter, just like the Impressionist gave the idea. The man in the nature, in the landscape, with a model. Sometimes they were not, and it's supposed, the model is supposed to pose outside. Of course, the straw hat, and the easel, and the little pliant, I don't know the word in English, and it's a kind of parody of what was the landscape painter during the at the end of in the second half of the 19th century. And so Picasso kept his lifelong this rhythm of painting during the winter in Paris in his studio and going anywhere, mainly on the Côte d'Azur during the summer. So you would have these paintings of the studio in the studio, just like on the left, and going to the Côte d'Azur, for example, the landscape that he did, not as much as other paintings, but quite every year in summer you have landscapes because he's outside the studio. 1909, for example, as well, you have the two nudes in the studio painted in Paris in the Bateau du Lavoir, and the Horta de Ebro landscape, Le Réservoir, which is so important, and I guess we will come back to this painting that you saw upstairs. Another question, it's a little outside this idea of the tradition, is I asked to myself, why would Picasso do this deed? Why did Picasso paint these landscapes, and especially in the starting of Cubism? And I tried to understand if there were just an appeal for the landscape, or perhaps there would be something else behind. You have here the landscapes which have been bought quite immediately after they have been painted. You have Stein, of course, Gertrude and Leo, and then after Gertrude on her own, and Shukin, who was a very important Russian collector. And what happens is that, and you have here, 1909, once again, Vollard, Haviland, Stein. You can see that there are some collectors who are, who purchased landscape. And it's another tradition that comes from the 19th century art market when l'École de Barbizon was promoted by Durand-Ruel, had very good sales, and especially in America. And since people of Barbizon, the amateurs of the École de Barbizon, the prices started to be high, but Durand-Ruel told them, so let's go for younger, they are less expensive, they are very good. And they would go to Monet, and they would go to Cézanne later, far later. But there was a kind of tradition to buy landscapes. And Picasso is just in this art market tradition to have, just like to follow up the market when the landscape was quite well seen. Okay. This one, I don't remember why it is here, but I'm sure I will find out. And so, yeah, here we are. After these considerations on the relation with the tradition of the landscape, including the new generations of Impressionists and Post-Impressionists, let me introduce you the second question. Is Picasso a painter of the 20th century? And here you have a wonderful painting which is upstairs. Let me remind to you that I never saw it because it never gets out Czechoslovakia for dark reasons, and we had this chance to have it as well as the Carrière-sur-Seine painting, and it's just marvelous. Here we are in 1910. It's Cadaqués, a little harbor for fishermen in Spain, Catalonia. And so this question. Well, here you see the painting on the left is not in the show, of course, the Réservoir des Hébraux, that it is thanks to the landscapes that Picasso created the Cubism. He was an interesting and very strong painter before Cubism, but everybody could say, and the critics, because critics started very early on Picasso, they would say, oh, you find everybody in Picasso's painting, and going to quote Pissarro, Cézanne, and Gauguin, and to tell that he was both very strong and had no specific style of his own. He didn't create it. He didn't create at this time what would make the big Picasso he will become. And it is thanks to the landscape that he started to create what will remain attached to his name, Picasso égale Cubism. In this, we all forget Braque, Georges Braque, who was very important in this, close to Picasso, but it is Picasso who has been the painter of the Cubism. Thanks to Gertrude Stein, who really promoted highly Picasso's Cubism. Of course, she bought this painting, and she, as much as Picasso, I'm sorry, I'm right, I just finished an article, an essay on Picasso and Gertrude Stein, and these are the questions I had in mind. As much as Picasso is well known as a Cubist painter, as much she can be recognized as a Cubist writer. So she needed to have this construction, and I love very much Gertrude Stein. So how did it happen? Picasso went to Horta d'Ebro, which is a small village in Catalonia, a little far from Barcelona, far because the roads were not very good. You had to go with a donkey. He brought his camera and made these pictures of the village. And he sent them to Gertrude Stein. In the same time, why? Okay, I go back there. In the same time, Fernande Olivier Fernande Olivier, who was Picasso's girlfriend at this time, sent the same pictures to Alistoclas, who was not, again, Gertrude Stein's girlfriend. But, and when she sent the letters to Gertrude Stein, she said, don't you want to come and visit us? See how the village is very nice. It was just like not just like, she wanted Gertrude and Leo to come and visit them in Spain. So it's a kind of teasing for the village itself. They wanted to be with their friends. It didn't happen. But the pictures have been taken, I think I have another slide, have been taken by Gertrude Stein because she was so clever and like the proof that Picasso needed to be in Spain to make to create the Cubism, because she just said, oh, look at the houses, you can find nowhere else. And Picasso just followed what he had under his eyes. He just had to go this way to create Cubism. And here you see very clearly the reservoir and the houses, except that you can have other witnesses talking, like Pallières, who was a very close friend to Picasso, and said, okay, but for example, in some paintings you have palm trees. There were no palm trees in Horta d'Ebro, what you can see here, but Picasso just added palm trees if you wanted to have palm trees. So it's always very tricky. But perhaps I will come back at Herakes once again. Yes, once again to tell you how far Picasso went with this question of Cubism, of breaking all the image, making this facet and this diamond shape. With here, you could not even say that what it is. We are very close to abstraction, at a point that Picasso will step back and say, okay, I want to move this direction. And he added, or not added, you have the anchor at the corner to say, okay, we are in a harbor, and I'm painting boats on the sea. And in fact, if you go to Cadaqués, not now, but go back to the beginning of the 20th century, it was a very dry, desertic, is it possible to say that? And fisherman village, and Fernande Olivier was complaining because she found nothing. It was just like the end of the world, very mineral. And this is a little what you have here, something very mineral with a little blue sea or sky, you can say. And so to tell you that Picasso was quite sensitive. In the same time, he could do whatever he wanted, added palm trees, but can be very sensitive to the environment. I asked myself about tradition, about 20th century, and at the end, what appeared is that the landscape is the place where Picasso can react to the world which surrounds him, that he was not just a painter of the human figure, the painters who said, oh, Nazi is very bad, and war is bad and wrong and so on, but he was as well someone who was interested with what was just around him. He died, of course, this is the 50th anniversary of his death. This is something we have to, it will be on April 8th. And it was just the year before the presidential elections, where for the first time an ecologist ran for the presidential. So when he died, all the questions regarding what we are doing with the environment were rising, and I was wondering about his commitment to this kind of preoccupation. So now we are back to Horta de Ebro, and I wanted to show you a photo that Picasso traditionally does after the summer. He gathers all his paintings and make a kind of, okay, I did all of this during the summer. And you have on the left, une tête which is said de Fernande. I don't agree, but it does not matter. And this head, you can see that it is with the landscapes, just like if the landscape would have helped Picasso to think about the human figure. There is something that's happening with the landscapes and the head of Fernande, which looks like the Montagne Sainte Barbara. It's just like you had the same way of considering the motif. Still all the Horta de Ebro, and yes, I knew I did it. You have what has been published at the request of Gertrude Stein in Transition, which was a small review in 1927. And she explained that to Etienne Jolas that it was not possible that the Cubism would be invented anywhere else than in Spain, and by Picasso because he was Spanish. And so this is what she showed the photos Picasso sent him, and she shows a painting that she purchased by courtesy of Miss Stein. And so doing this, she gives this idea of Picasso égale Cubism. We forget Georges Braque. That Picasso is Spanish, so Cubism is Spanish. And she adds this idea in the autobiography of Alistoclas, 1933, that she's an American. American is very close to Spain, equal, she's a Cubist herself. And she promoted all this question around the Cubism thanks to the photos she received by Picasso. And she forgot that the photos were perhaps just like, okay, look at where we are, friendly pictures. And after that, here you have this Fernande writing to Alistoclas. I send you a photo of the country where we are. And here are photos, and she says, she writes to Picasso at the bottom of the letter, the picture of the village does the picture of the village give you the wish to come and visit us? All these questions are just forgotten to make the photo the origin of the Cubism, because after the publication of Gertrude Stein, it was to say, look, he just paints the reality. The historian of photography took the advantage of these photos to say, look at how photographs are important. Picasso used them to create Cubism. It's all a kind of, it's just like, you always have to look at the story when things happen in order not to say at the end, Picasso painted landscapes thanks to photographies, but perhaps the story was totally different. I don't have the end, but I would like to say, be careful. Okay, again, once again, I'm so happy you have this painting. And here, just like I told you, the mineral landscape, these are postcards that both Alice and Picasso sent to Gertrude Stein. And so here is the question of the environment. I started to change my point of view and to enlarge it. One moment, please. To the question of the environment, when I was asking myself about this landscape, so strange, so weird, no one would say that it is a Picasso. I can say a little because behind I see the reflection of what Picasso did when he made theater and ballet setting. It's very important here, but why snow, what it is, this is very weird. And I started to dig and I made a lot of researches like that in the archives because I love archives, in fact. It's a treat for me. And I discovered that when Picasso painted this painting, there was a big storm of snow on Paris, and all Paris was changed with the snow, and the newspapers, and you have a little movie upstairs, they said, go out and look at this spectacle. It's wonderful to have this snow. And Picasso painted not like an impressionist. It's something very different, and perhaps I have to reconsider what I just said about the photos and Gertrude Stein, because I'm pretty sure that he went through this kind of photos to represent the trees with the snow. It's not an impressionist at all. It's something very different, very built, and so on. Here you have La Vigie, painted during summer 1924, because when he would arrive for his vacation, he started to go out and made some little sketches of what was happening around, houses, roads, little things like that, and painted some landscapes. I told you, quite every summer landscapes. And here, so you had this one, 24. I just wanted to add, because these are very small landscapes, and I asked myself, why would he? This is very strange. Can we consider landscape as a moment of chilling for Picasso, doing something else, not so heavy that what he did in the studio during the winter? And in fact, I checked and I saw that Picasso not only painted these little landscapes, but let them published in art papers, art magazines, art reviews, like Cahiers d'Art, for example, which was a very prestigious review. He exhibited them in shows, and for example, his first retrospective of 1932, you can see a wall with big paintings that blue period, pink period, and small landscapes like that. And he sold them, little landscapes like that. Picasso would sell them. So it's not just like doing something for himself and like a kind of, okay, I just having a little fun. No, it was very serious because he published them. He agreed to let them know it was not for himself. It was for something, another purpose. And here you have the same connection that we saw with the snow. He had these holidays on the Côte d'Azur, beautiful villa, and there was big fires during the summer. You can see in the newspaper. And so Picasso would paint the house and the fire behind. And once again, you can see the difference between what Picasso painted and what Monet could have done with such fires if he had painted fires. Here we have always the same story. Would go to the country. Here he bought a country house, a castle, a manor, at 80 miles from Paris in Normandy, and painted 3 years later a series of landscapes where you can see that the weather is really Normandy, rainbows, and it's, well, these landscapes have to be considered like the landscape he traditionally did during holidays, which actually were never holidays. But we have to go back to this idea of tradition where you can see, for example, Turner giving this portrait of the paintworks house and its environment, works which has been displayed in the drawing or one of the rooms of the Petworth house. And Picasso, in fact, painting this very strange, it's upstairs, shape, certainly had in mind to make a decoration of his own castle with his own works, like all the kings and the big the people who had castles, Louis XIV, Louis XV, the owner of Petworth would do. It's really a tradition of making portraits of a place and its surroundings. Here we have a very different kind of landscape. On the right, it's Mougins, 1937, just after Guernica. Picasso went to Mougins with a lot of friends, and he painted 5 landscapes of Mougins. This is quite the largest of them. If I mention the scale, it's because some of the landscapes are really large. It's not just like just this idea of doing singing, just like Monet would say, I paint like the bird sings. We are in a very different, for Monet as well, of course, but we are in a very different way of painting. And I give you here on the left a picture of 1937. It's a flyer I found about Mougins, where you can see the way the village is built at the top of the hill with a very pleasant snake shell pattern going like that until the top of the hill. You have the tower of the church, and here you have the tower of the church. And in fact, Picasso reproduces on the canvas this primitive pattern of the village, which was very close to the needs of the people who lived there to protect themselves from the heat and the sun. And this kind of very bright and very free. It's a summer he spent with his surrealist friends, Éluard, Man Ray, Hélène Agar, Dora Maar, of course, and they had all big parties playing and being very happy, la famille heureuse, just like it is written somewhere. And Picasso was in this mood of doing things a little different, not so different, in fact, than what he did, because we are always in this rhythm of summer égale landscape. And when I say it's not so different, you have this little paysage of 1921 where you see that he makes the windows the same shape, very simple, and it's just like he always had this in his mind the same way to make his landscapes in the 1920s and 1930s. Now this is a full other story of a landscape. We are in Royan, and we have 2 postcards that Picasso kept in his it was not archives because he was still alive. It became archives after his death. Picasso kept everything, every paper. When you come back at home, you just take what you had in your pockets and you just throw it away. Picasso kept everything, which gives us the opportunity to know quite well what he was doing. And here is postcards, and you have his studio on the bottom, and with this beautiful yellow arrow, Le Café des Bains, which was a place on the harbor where he used to have a bottle of Evian after his promenade, after his walk, or after a moment working in the studio, or with his daughter, Maya. This is what she said. She drank chocolate and he would drink Evian. And the Café des Bains is precisely the place that he chose to paint before he left Royan. Let me give you the context, the background. We are in 1939. The war, Second World War broke out, and Picasso was completely anxious because he was a foreigner in Paris, not good at this time where the foreigners had to be sent back to where they belong. First. Second, he had a large amount of works, which were so important in terms of value. It was really just like crazy. He had 3 vaults at the bank full of paintings, which were to be sold. And he knew that because he experienced the First World War, that a war makes all the art market very fragile. Canvailer, during the First World War, lost all the paintings he bought to Picasso. And it's really bad moments. So he didn't know what to do. He went to Royan, where Marie-Thérèse Walter used to live, was having holidays with their daughters. He went with his secretary, Jaime Sabartez, and with his girlfriend of the time, Dora Maar. And it was a moment with big tension and with sometimes quite good moments, I guess so. And when he decided to leave for Paris at the end of the physical war, when the Germans were settled in half of France, including Paris, he just chose to go to Paris because the danger was here. Well, just like he would put himself in the eye of the tornado to be a little less moved by all the circles. And so before he left, he painted these very large landscapes that you can see with the Café des Bains. What is interesting is that it was one of the first topics of the postcards that visitors of Royan sent to their friends, family, and so on. So we see Picasso who took a very large known place in Royan, and to make this painting, which is just like a souvenir of these very strange 12 months he spent in this small city on the west coast of France. These are works, unfortunately, we don't have in the show, Souvenir du Havre, because I told you it is a kind of souvenir. And in fact, Picasso created a kind of yes, it is a new genre, which would be a mix between the landscape and the still life, or how a still life could represent a landscape. On the left, you have Souvenir du Havre. Picasso spent some days in Le Havre, which is another harbor in Normandy. He was there with Georges Braque. And coming back to Paris, he made this painting with all the Cubist vocabulary, but he understood that no one would understand he was in Le Havre. So he added the letters. It is the beginning of the papier collé, and when he started to introduce letters here. And it's inspired with these postcards, once again, when you could have Souvenir du Havre, and it is a postcard that actually Braque sent to Kahnweiler, who was their art dealer. It's a mix of still life and landscape, and an intellectual landscape. So we have the moment when Picasso left Royan with his daughter. He was behind the wheel of his Hispano-Suiza that he never drove. He had a chauffeur. And he had behind all the works he did in Royan, going back to Paris. And after he left, in 1945, American planes bombed Royan, and this is what remained of his studio on the harbor. It has been really a big disaster. So he's in Paris, he's back in Paris. We are in 1943, and he's back in his studio, which is very close to the River Seine, in the historical center of Paris. And he would go for walks with his dog and would go to his mistress, Marie-Thérèse Walter, and visited his daughter, Maya, we already saw. And represented this place, which is really at the heart of Paris. And it is as well the place where this is the first tree in Paris which has leaves during for spring. It's the first, when you see the tree, you say, wow, we are in spring. So it's a very important place for Parisian. And Picasso painted this area. And in the same time, this is one of my obsessive ideas, that you just can't see Picasso like he's a painter of Marie-Thérèse or Françoise or whatever, whoever mistress. He's a painter of blue period, pink period, blue period, okay? He's as well a painter who has something in mind and will always come back to what he had in mind. For example, sorry, I could not get, because they are in private collections, better photos. And here you have the Pont Neuf and you have l'Île de la Cité, which are exactly what he would, 1912, he would paint that 32, I am very bad in math, 32 years later, he will come back to this motif. And here you have this large, wonderful painting of Paris with Notre-Dame de Paris, but you have Montmartre at the I don't know, up of the painting, the place where he used to live, a place that he already painted in 1910. And you can see that he is always coming back to what he already did. Here you have these famous kind of photos where he gathers all the paintings, and you have all this Notre-Dame de Paris, including the little one which is upstairs. And my question was, what's happening here? Because it's not, well, it's not the big Picasso. Why? And he spoke about this painting to Malraux, to Brassailles, and it's just like an amateur. He painted like, if you go along the River Seine, you will see the painters, the amateur, they would paint things like that. And in my mind, there are two questions, two things behind. First, he had a full respect for amateur. Sometimes and I found this in newspapers, he would stop, look at what the painter said, and sometimes it happened, well, according to the newspapers twice, he would say to the painter, oh, you are a painter, would you like to visit my studio? So a kind of respect for the painting of amateur. And second, he was a painter who was not allowed to exhibit. He exhibited, but in a very small, it was in dark, I would say, dark galleries, because he was not allowed to exhibit. He was un peintre dégénéré. There was no art market, so not being able to exhibit, not being able to sell, he became not a professional, but an amateur. So it was just like he said, he would say, okay, I am an amateur, so I am an amateur, and I will paint like an amateur, and you have all these paintings. But in the same time, you have something behind, which is a view of Notre-Dame de Paris, one of the oldest places in Paris, a kind of, okay, there are the Germans everywhere, but Paris remains Paris. And Notre-Dame de Paris will still stand, whatever is happening. And well, okay, I put you this, I don't, well, we can do that, but since I have it, it was the walk he would do to go from his place, the arrow on the left, to Marie-Thérèse's place on the right, and he made this travel, crossing, he saw the Notre-Dame de Paris, of course, every other Thursdays and Saturday, because his daughter was not at school. So you see that Notre-Dame de Paris is really in the center of his occupations. I told you about the peintre amateur, and you have here at the bottom the peintre amateur painting Notre-Dame de Paris, just like Picasso did. And you have this small paper cut, a press cut with Picasso, so un peintre amateur painting. And it is the place, Notre-Dame de Paris, which was in front of the headquarters of the Résistance during the Libération de Paris. And you see that the struggle was very strong. And it is a place where Charles de Gaulle would go at once, arriving in Paris, and with one of the first places where the French flag was hung. It means that you have a lot of layers, and including political statement, which is, I paint Notre-Dame de Paris because it is a symbol for France, for Paris, and for the resistance against the Germans. Now we have another story, Picasso in Vallauris. After World War II, he settled in Vallauris, and you have him, once again, behind his easel, acting like, I'd say acting because I don't know exactly if he would look at the landscape or if he would have in his mind. And he painted a lot of landscapes in Vallauris for different reasons, and mainly because he needed the landscape to find a new way in painting. And he said this very clearly to Matisse. Matisse asked him for a landscape. Please give me your landscape. And Picasso said, no, I need this landscape to move forward. Just like in 1909, the landscape would be a way to do something different. And so he painted, and because he was very happy to be in this village, to have this daily life very easy with people around, and so he painted a lot of landscapes. Here you have this wonderful panorama, very bad picture once again, and we could not get it. And you have this representation. This is on the left, the landscape that he didn't want to give to Matisse, because it was a key word for him. Once again, landscape as a key word. So a lot of Vallauris landscapes. And once again, you see that the landscape is inscribed in his career, because in 1951, there was this big, it was a wonderful art review, which was called Verve, and Picasso, in this review, presented his landscapes because they mattered to him. They said something. It's not something on the side. It's really something important for his work and for him, with a very important essay by Kahnweiler. So, with or without the landscapes are changing. Who am I quoting? Here you have a photo of Picasso visiting La Cité Radieuse in Marseille, the famous architecture of Le Corbusier. You see him with his glasses. To tell you how much Picasso was interested in what was happening on La Côte d'Azur at this time. A big urbanization, with a lot of constructions. I went through the Actualité, and I saw that every day you had people cutting ribbon and buildings destroyed and other one built. And it was a moment when people had to think about how to give home to a lot of people who had nothing after the war, and because the standards of comfort had changed. So he was very interested. And here, these are the things we could not have in the show. You see Picasso drawing his own buildings with little people, cars, and just like he had in mind, just like Le Corbusier, the city of tomorrow. I think it's amazing, very amazing. So, just to tell you, you remember I told you he always come back to the place of the murder. 1929, I think, on the left, you have a painting with a kind of monument, head of woman, at the top of a hill with two little characters down. He started this in 1927 when he decided he would build monuments on La Croisette, big beach of Cannes. And he said, no one wants of my monuments, so I have to paint them. And so he painted quite a lot. And every year, from 1929 until 1950 and something, you will find head of women at the top of a hill, which are monuments for, obviously for people. And here you have sculptures he carved in Bois Gelou, and he took Paul, his son, toys, and you see in the photo how the small, they are like that, become large monuments on, and everything around becomes a city, just like the sculpture was able to change everything and to be, I don't have the vocabulary, I'm sorry, I don't have the word, but to be part of the city, to be part of the daily life, to be part of the urban landscape. And so beautiful on the right, 1957, he made this big head, and he added this little character, a palm tree, which is in fact, something that you use to dust, and an umbrella. I had it in one of my shows. It remains in Picasso's family, and so I had the little an umbrella and people. And he said, once he did that, you have behind, you have the sketch of a building, which is Cannes. Always the same idea since 1927. And he said to Jacqueline, look at, he said, look, it would be a perfect place for a young couple to live in. This is what he had in mind. And he tried to make these monuments who would change the landscape, who would change the life, and who would change the view of the people, because you could climb into the monuments. And one of the end of this very long thought about the monuments, building the landscape, you have the head for Chicago, and he added a little figure to say, this is the scale, and look at the way it will work. It's always the same idea since 1927. Here we are in La Californie, above Cannes, and here it's a beautiful view from the window of his studio, one of his studios, and you have La Méditerranée, you have les îles de l'Érins, and you have this crane as a mark, a sign of what was going on, this urbanization we already discussed. And so at this moment, scholars say that he would leave because he could not stand what was happening, all the constructions, and he bought a castle at Vauvenargues, just at the bottom of Notre-Dame de Sainte-Victoire, sorry, by Cézanne. And he said, well, I bought Cézanne, I bought La Montagne Sainte-Victoire, but Cézanne paints the Sainte-Victoire, and Picasso paints the opposite of the Sainte-Victoire. He paints the village, just like he painted Valoris, preferring, and just like he painted Juan-les-Pins, or he painted Mougins. He prefers, he loves the small villages, obviously. And so he had three options regarding this, the changing in the landscapes. First, to escape and go to Vauvenargues, which were very remote place, very green and so on, with a very old castle. To do like Renoir, to settle in a place with olive trees and going close up the trees around. 3, going back to Van Gogh, who considered that the civilization, urbanization, was the reason why people of his time were unhappy and got crazy. And 4, just to embrace what was happening and paint these buildings he had going out, just like you saw in the first picture. So it shows all the options, and being in the same time a painter so I told you about Renoir. It happened that Renoir, at the end of the 19th century, bought a little house called Les Colettes, and you will guess what? This little painting, Picasso bought it. The painting representing Renoir's house in Cagnes, Picasso bought it for his collection. And under you have a painting of the olive trees of the Les Colettes garden, and you have the olive trees in Picasso's garden in Notre-Dame-de-Vie, which is the same kind of house that what Renoir bought. Renoir was already dead, but Picasso was very friend to Renoir's son, Jean Renoir, the director, and it's my idea that he could visit Les Colettes. Visited or not, he had the same wish to go to have a kind of, I don't know how to say, to be in the nature and to get rid about everything that would happen around. The other option is Van Gogh. Van Gogh, Picasso, settling in the south of France, often went to Arles to see the corrida. And each time he thought about Van Gogh, who he considered to be one of the most important painters ever, and I do agree. And he quoted quite exactly Van Gogh in this painting and in other, when he went back to Van Gogh in order to find in nature a kind of pain relief, something that will curate all the bad of civilization. And he did the fourth option, embracing what was going on, and say, okay, this is what, may I have an idea of the time? Okay, I think we are quite good. Painting these buildings in what is called, at the end of Picasso's life, bat painting, fast and so on. And I must say, I like it very much. And it starts now, only now, to have amateur for this. We should have done this show 10 years ago. It would have been far much easier. And the insurance values would have been lower. It's just now that people consider these landscapes as something interesting. But I must say that Clément Greenberg said awful things about these paintings and put a kind of spell on the last period of Picasso, telling, well, this is bad, this is very bad. And I don't know how I like them so much. And I think I'm right, because when we see them upstairs, it's just amazing. Why? Okay, so you have another landscape here, a TV. I like very much this, to show how he would display the landscape at home. And on the right, you have this photo with a painting, a landscape inspired by Van Gogh, 1954, I think, and Arlésienne, inspired directly by Van Gogh. And to show as well, like Van Gogh did, for Van Gogh, a landscape and a human figure are equal. And he would make think about Le Portrait de Madame Roulin, you had Madame Roulin, and you had a landscape. In fact, it was a wheat field, and he made some pairs like that, and in fact, it is exactly what Picasso did, made pair with landscape and human figure. And here we are. We are arriving to April 8th, 1973. Picasso died, and some weeks later, there was the opening of a show displayed in Le Palais des Papes d'Avignon, all the paintings without frames, just put on the wall. And it's written in the catalogue, but I forgot the numbers. A lot nude, musketeers, putty nudes, and one landscape. Painted in April, I think, 1972, that you see here in a very, it's such an important display. It's really the way Picasso, it was not Picasso, but I'm pretty sure they discussed before, the way he would hang and display his works. Picasso is so fascinating because he makes works, and he makes works with his works. He's always in the meta work. You have something, he does more, just like you saw with a sculpture. It's a sculpture, but it can become a monument, but it can change everything around. And so we have this landscape. And preparing the show, I spent some time in Mougins, trying to understand what he was painted. And this 1972 painting happens to be certainly a place which was at the bottom of the hill of Notre-Dame-de-Vie. And it was a place where they recycled water, used water. So we go back to the motif of the importance of the water, the way you keep water. You keep the water. You have the motif of the palm tree, because in this place there are no palm trees, just like you had in the factory at Horta des Hébraux. And you have the motif of the reservoir where you keep the water, just like if in 1972 he would go back to what he painted in 1909 at Horta des Hébraux. And I didn't tell you, but when there was Verve, the review, Verve, Kahnweiler wrote, Picasso remains a cubist painter. And when you have this painting with the sign, you have this kind of arrow, which reminds the anchor of Cadaqués, but as well as Souvenir du Havre. And he just like he was coming back to what he once did. And I have to add that going to Horta des Hébraux in 1909 was going back to the village where he spent the happiest years in his life. It was in 1897 when he spent 7 months in Horta des Hébraux with his friend Pallares. And he is someone, we can say, he always changes, but in fact, he remains always the same, going back, doing things a little different, trying other ways, and having this ability to take the whole world in his work. Do I have something else? This is the end. This is Vauvenargues, this castle he bought at the bottom of La Sainte-Victoire. You see an old castle, very fortress, and this is a place where he chose to be buried. And he has been buried in the middle of the landscape, just behind, under La Sainte-Victoire, which is, La Sainte-Victoire has become a Cézanne. When you go to La Sainte-Victoire, to Aix-en-Provence, it is not anymore La Sainte-Victoire, it is a Cézanne, and then after, a mountain. So Picasso buried himself in the nature, in the landscape, and in a Cézanne landscape. And I think, oh, okay, I had this last image of Picasso going for a walk in Notre-Dame-de-Vie. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.